no one seems to be talking about the environmental impact of war and how this war in Ukraine is setting us back decades to meet our targets for net zero. So yes, it's true that Russia's attack on Ukraine is an environmental crisis too. It's literally tearing the country apart, polluting the air and water. The toxins have been running off into the watercourses since the thaw started in Ukraine. Now, the planet is also a victim, which we all will suffer. Now, in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine, the ground has been behaving strangely. In some places, it is sinking. Elsewhere, it heaves, bulging upwards. That's what it's doing. Now, this is according to satellite data. Now, before it became a conflict zone, because of Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion, I'm sorry, I'll just say it as I see it. And it's so sad what's happening there. But that's not what this video is about. It's about the environmental impact. Well, the Donbas has long been Ukraine's coal region, and the earth is riddled with hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath cities, factories, and farms. Many of them are abandoned. Now, recently, those shafts have been flooding, causing the surface to shift, carrying toxic chemicals that now threaten the region's water supply. Not just for people, but for animals too. Now, in some tunnels, there's actually toxic waste. It's not Springfield, no. No, this toxic waste is stored in some of those mines. And the site of nuclear tests in the 1970s, well, it still remains radioactive. Now, Ukrainian scientists have warned that the risks to the region could be more deep and dangerous than Chernobyl. You know, the power station that, went into meltdown. Something to do with putting the rods in too fast or something, because they're coated in something, not quite certain about that. That's called science. That's beyond me. But anyway, since 2014, when Russia's annexation of Crimea, also illegal, it sparks, fighting in the Donbas. The region has been the site of a parallel ecological catastrophe. It involves not only the mines, but toxic leaks from industrial facilities that have fallen into disuse and contamination released, what's caused by the shelling it is, and the munitions. And what it's doing is it's releasing all these toxins into the atmosphere and into the watercourses. This is serious stuff. But no one's talking about it. I've done videos about this before, but no one seems to care. Well, the health effects of Putin's war are likely to be felt long after the physical conflict subsides. But it's going to be felt by us all. The damage will unfurl. In a slow motion it will. Long after the bombs have stopped falling and the world's attention has moved on. Thinking about the cleanup, I suppose, or not. Now, it's an extension of what we've seen in the Donbas, where you have a conflict amidst this super concentrated amount of heavy industry and this grim environmental history. It's not that good in Ukraine or Russia, no. They don't care about the environment. No, they don't. Industrial facilities, military installations and radioactive waste repositories have come under fire from Russian planes and artillery. Now, those weapons have, the potential to leave not only the immediate destruction, but a longer tail of polluted air and, water that will be felt long after the conflict subsides. Emissions, pollutions, monitoring systems are largely offline, or at the very least going unchecked. But as a heavily industrialised country that it is, Ukraine already had a baseline of bad air, bad policy, bad practices. Well, they've already one of the worst worst for air quality they are. Get my words out in a minute. They're already the worst country for bad air. So, well, in Europe that is. Now, Russian shelling, missiles and tank rounds are, well, they're chewing up pretty much the entirety of the built-up environment. Explosions, they fling a wide array of materials into the air, into the atmosphere. From heavy metals in industrial sites to concrete cables and piping in the roads. Including asbestos. You know, that stuff that gives you asbestosis. When the little fibres get into your lungs and they're barbed, and they tear your pleural layers of your lungs, scarring it and scarring it. It heals and it scars it some more, reducing your lung capacity until you can breathe no more. Oh dear, sounds like a rhyme. Well, not a very good one, mind. Don't give up your day job. Well, it's only until recently asbestos has even been banned. I mean, really recently. Within the last, I think, 10, 20 years. That's to say nothing of the heavy compounds and explosives themselves. Well, the idea of an explosive is just destroy stuff. They don't care what toxins are in it, no. Now, areas of war-torn Ukraine have no or little electricity. Civilians are, they're dug in and they're powering devices, what have you, with generators in their basements, inhaling all that burnt fuel. But the toxics, well, they include lead and mercury, they are. But they're trapped down there. Some of them daren't come out. Don't blame them. Well, it is a toxic stew that has been aerolized. And then, of course, some of that will get into the soil and the groundwater. You can't get away from it. It's just what happens. Now, no particulate matter is good to have in the lungs, especially asbestos. Our lungs have evolved, pretty much to clear a lot of these foreign objects. But not these poisons, no. And the whole point of, obviously, the mucus in our lungs, when we cough it up, we cough the mucus up, is to get rid of these little bodies, these little particulates. But particulate matter of 2.5 micrometers, smaller than, well, they can slip past these defences and get deep into the lungs, eventually passing into the bloodstream. Now that delivers heavy metals into our blood. And it risks organ failure. But it gets worse. Oh my God, this sounds terrible, this is. I was going to sit down. Now, chemicals used to suppress fires are known to be extremely toxic. Now, once the attacks stop, the clean-up and reconstruction will begin, we hope. Exposing still more people to the toxicants. Well, all the emitted CO2 from the country's development over several decades. It's all for nothing now. Since it's all been destroyed. Not quite all, but it's getting that way. Now, reconstructing what Putin has destroyed will carry a heavy price for the planet. Now, 1 tonne of CO2 is produced for every tonne of concrete. Straight into the atmosphere. Now, in the midst of a war, environmental damage is difficult to track and measure, like Chernobyl, where the status of monitoring and maintenance is uncertain. After the sensors recorded high gamma radiation levels there, a couple of 3 weeks ago now. Well, explosions, I say a couple of 3 weeks ago, it's now the 2nd of April 2022. The explosions at an oil reservoir just outside Kiev has been, spewing unknown toxicants into the air. All this stuff would have been, contained. But not now. No. It's been released. Now, the full toll will likely only become clearer in the aftermath of the war. And then the question is, what will be done about it? Now, I think one thing we could say for certain is that things, they don't always get cleaned up after conflicts now. Pretty much anywhere. Referring to conflicts in places like Afghanistan and Syria, it's not a particularly rosy or cherry situation for whoever takes over after this war. But this war could drag on and on. The governments can bulk at the often extraordinary expense of removing toxic materials. I hate that term, government spending. They're spending our money, taxpayers' money, your money. Don't forget that. Our governments, they can bulk at the often extraordinary expense of removing toxic materials from soil and water. Health systems reading from handling the casualties of war may struggle to keep up with the chronic health problems that follow. What about mental health? Could you imagine what people are going to be going through after this? Now, once the bombs stop falling on Ukraine, we'll soon realise that our 8-year window for healing the planet has been spent. In the name of Vladimir Putin and his illegal war. So if you support Vladimir Putin and his so-called, special operation, whatever you like to call it, it's a war, it's an invasion of a democratic country. Well, if you do, then you're complicit. That's what I say. What do you think? Please leave it in the comments down below. And don't forget to boot the old like button, because it really helps the channel, you know. So, I'm going to say, ta-ta.